You're under arrest.
I never saw her before in my life. Ask her. What are you doing? Hey!
You're going to kill us.
Capture him? No. If we don't get out of here soon, we are two dead people. Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello and welcome to GammaCast. I am your host, Charlie Esser. Not with us this week is David White, but in his place, the more than capable, awesome podcast best pal of mine from Super Connectivity and the all-new Marvel Roundup, Philip Perch. Philip, say hi.
Hi.
Okay, great. So this week's episode, and everyone, just actually let me get this out of the way. It's been a little while since we last posted an episode. Things have come up. David, basically, he's pulling back a little bit on the talent end. He's going more behind the scenes, which is, great for the 80s reboot station. But it left me without a co-host, and so recently, David told me, let's see if we can find another co-host to work with you. I was, of course, sad to see him go, but I'm happy to start it up. Phil is not going to be here permanently. Phil is on 8 million other podcasts right now, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, where you can hear his wit and wisdom elsewhere. So if any of our listeners has always wanted to bust into the fast-paced, fun world of podcasting, drop us a line here at the 80s Reboots channel and let us know you're interested. Okay, so Phil, you saw tonight's episode.
Yes, sir.
Escape from Los Santos. Escape from the Saint. I don't know why they named this town the Saint, but we'll move along with that. The recap of the film is David Brown. Brown is David's ever so subtle nom de guerre as he is traveling the country this week. David Brown and a young widow he has never met before are framed for murder for the murder of her husband by a corrupt sheriff and his men handcuffed together. The two must make their escape. This episode was directed by Chuck Bowman. It was written by Kenneth Johnson, Bruce Kalish, and there was an extra person who did some writing, Philip John Taylor. Of course, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee credited with the original creation of the Hulk. Kenneth Johnson is actually the guy who developed the show. Notable guest stars, we have Dana Elkar, who is Pete Thompson from MacGyver. As you may recall, from the 80s, a show called MacGyver, very popular. Pete Thornton was his character's name. He was actually MacGyver's boss. So it's always good when we can spot someone. Another guy that jumped out at me was Lee DeBrox. He plays Mike Evans in this. He actually was in Voyagers, which is one of my favorite shows from the 80s. Did you ever watch Voyagers when you were young, Phil?
No.
Okay. It lasted a very short time because sadly the lead died when he intentionally shot himself in the head with a blank gun. Didn't intend to kill himself. He just died. This is not a Jack McGee episode, which is always a little sad, but that was probably the least weak part about this episode. What did you think of the episode, Phil?
It was all right. Not a lot, I think, would have changed with this episode. If you had taken the Hulk out completely, if Banner hadn't changed into the Hulk, not a lot about this episode would have changed. I mean, it would have been harder to escape from prison. It might have been a little harder to get away from the corrupt cops at the end. But even still, It wasn't the Hulk who ultimately got them past the police.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually one of these things that does come up. David and I have talked about it in previous episodes. Where is this an episode you really needed to have a Hulk in? Mm-hmm. One of the things they do tend to do on the Incredible Hulk is they sort of take a genre piece of the week, and they say, how can we put the Hulk into this genre piece? We've had a boxing episode, we've had a race driver episode, we just had our football hero episode. You have these things that sort of fit into these normal tropes, and then they insert a Hulk. Sometimes that's very interesting, say with the boxer episode, where they actually managed to completely subvert the standard tropes of your standard boxing film, where in that one the guy realizes, hey, I'm not that good of a boxer, I think I'll just give up boxing and go be an auto mechanic, which to me to this day is like one of the best ways to approach a genre piece. And this one, I think this is your prison break film. This is sort of your cool hand Luke, with Luke being played by a beautiful young woman, who David does not get to woo per se, although she's a widow, so it's sort of understandable. Here she's played by the talented Shelley Fabares. Basically, we open up with David hitchhiking, as he does in many of these episodes, and he sees the cops running past him, chasing Holly Cooper, is the character's name, in her station wagon, with the lights blaring. And he's like, I wonder what that's all about. Oh, well, doesn't concern me. Hitchhike. A little while later, a cop pulls along and says, hey, need a lift, buddy? I'll take you into town. You can stay at a motel. We're real friendly here. And then things go south. Of what it is he is being framed for the murder of Holly Cooper's husband. Holly Cooper's husband. It's a good thing there was a random drifter on the road right at that time that they could collect in. Unfortunately, that drifter was also the Hulk. They pepper spray David, that causes the Hulk out, leading for him to escape. And in the escape, we get one of the really iconic scenes of the Hulk smashing through that brick wall. And to me, that was like a real redeeming quality of this. Every time we get a really good Hulk moment, we prefer super leaps, but smashing through a brick wall is really one of those good iconic Hulk moments for this, and we did get one in this episode. They escape. They wind up befriending a group of very friendly migrants. It's a very interesting thing we talk about sometimes on this show, where there are a lot of racial tropes from the 70s and late 70s, early 80s here that were very standard. Although I will say that, again, at the end of it, we do subvert that a bit when we find out that the father of the group is actually, I believe he said he's from Cleveland, Ohio, and speaks perfect English, even though they didn't have him speaking English up until that point in the whole show. After they befriend the migrant workers, they are still pursued by the police. They're trying to get this microfilm, because when they went back to Holly's house, she found that her friends won't talk to her because they all know that they all think she murdered her husband with this drifter, Bill Bixby. And hey, when you see him, you understand. Yeah, I see why she flipped. That's one good-looking drifter, as we always say. The house has been ransacked. All of her husband's files have been taken, but they do find, I believe, he had all of his files on microfilm. They say, we just have to get this to the prosecutor, and then we'll be cleared. Unfortunately, what happens, Phil, when they get to the prosecutor?
He's in on it.
Yeah, he totally was in on it, which I have to say I saw coming. It's just such, it's such a standard second act, that, and that's the thing but it makes sense when you think about it. When you talk about like these corrupt sheriffs kind of situations, is that obviously if the sheriff is corrupt, someone else above him is probably pretty corrupt too. Because if he's running this criminal enterprise in this small town, someone else must be getting a cut too.
Yeah, the town's so small. I mean, if to keep your secret, a bunch of people probably have to be in on it.
Well, that's the thing. It's probably the whole town is,
Yeah.
It's one of these things. It's one of these open criminal secrets because, they're going to smuggle everything in and have it go to the next town over, and it's not their problem, and they're going to reap the rewards in some way or another. Or, through threats and intimidation, they manage to keep their secrets. Obvious point in this, again, we have in this the trope that is, I think, pretty much the standard trope in this universe, which is that any disputes is best solved first by murder. Because we have a problem. Well, have we tried murdering him yet? Because that's our go-to. I'm not sure that's the best way to solve problems, but it kind of gives you, I'm always a big guy for trying to understand what are the physics of this universe. What are we seeing when we're seeing this universe? And clearly this is a universe that exists in kind of fairly ultra-violent social society,
Mm-hmm.
that is just the standard method for people. It's just easier to kill someone and get away with it, usually, if a Hulk doesn't show up, than to actually solve your problems. Which is sad, but also explains why this society seems to be so violent, and why maybe this is a world that needed a Hulk. They do realize that the prosecutor was in on the take, and so they realize they have to go above him to the federal prosecutors. Would have been very sad if it went all the way up, but they do have to escape. They have to cross, and I think that was like supposed to be power lines.
I don't know. I don't know if it was some kind of an actual. Well, there wasn't a bottom to it, so it wasn't an actual bridge, was it?
No. It was actually it was either a pipeline, which I don't think it was, because I don't think when he started smashing it that we were getting oil everywhere, which would have been a whole other thing to comment on. Mm-hmm. I think it was supposed to be a power line, because out west sometimes they will just run the power lines along the ground because why bother putting it on a post? That's just, there's no one around to keep it out of the way of. We're in the middle of the desert. Let's just run it across the road. So I think that was supposed to be power lines that they were trying to cross. And although in that case, I don't think there was a lot of whatever it was. I guess it could have also been a water pipe. I'm not 100% certain on exactly what it was meant to be, but they're trying to cross it, and the Hulk basically, snaps the cords and nearly kills all those cops. Yeah, well, that's always the problem with the Incredible Hulk. He doesn't kill, but man, he's lucky. He's lucky that every so often people get out of the way. Phil, did anything about this episode jump out at you as either particularly bothersome or particularly good for you?
Maybe a little bothersome. Like I told you, we're not there yet, but the ending is just basically they got past the police without the Hulk. The Hulk would have been a big spectacle, but it just seemed like justice prevailed and everything, but the ending seemed kind of anticlimactic,
Yeah, well, they do have this problem every so often where you get to these endings and there's, because of Banner's situation, mm-hmm. He can't stick around. You can't really get much resolution beyond, well, I've gotten you this far, and now I'm going to make the calculated risk that everything's going to be fine once I leave. Mm-hmm. But
even before that, just the way they sneak through the through the line with in the truck. You know, it's not a high speed chase. It's not this. It's not that. It's just them hiding, you know, in a crate in the back of this pickup truck.
Yeah. Well, see, now that was actually something I liked, you know, and again, because we do get this, you know, subversion of tropes. This, you know, we've seen this, I've seen this, although I do recommend go back and watch some of these old episodes. They are really great. I've often said this is the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Especially this season. I think this season really hits its stride well, and you know, you have a great if they ever do want to integrate the She-Hulk into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and actually have her be a She-Hulk, not just Jen Walters, the world's greatest lawyer. You know, you actually have this great idea put forth in the first season of this, which is called Marriage, which is David falls in love with this scientist in Hawaii who is suffering from some autoimmune disease. Basically, her body is attacking itself. It's causing her to have seizures and all these very problematic things. And, you know, they find that, well, you know, the Hulk cells could actually cure her. And, you know, you supplant that same illness into a Jen Walters, and suddenly you have why David Banner, you know, injects her with some Hulk blood, hoping to cure her, and maybe it does, but then the side effect comes in, and she's a She-Hulk. So it's perfect. It's great. I hope to see that in Jessica Jones season 2, along with Damien Hellstrom, sorry, and Damon, not Damien. It's Damon Hellstrom. Though everyone always, and it's not just me. I'm sure lots of people call him Damien Hellstorm, even though it is Damon Hellstrom. Weird. Anyway, but yeah, so they do solve the problem. They do get past the guards with the help of the Mexican gentleman from Cleveland, you know. But as I was saying, they do like to establish what is a standard racial trope of the day, and then they do try to subvert it by basically suggesting that the people who are part of this trope are sort of playing along for their own advantage. In this case, you know, it's the guy who's pretending he doesn't speak as much English as he does, just to sort of, you know, get past the cops and just, you know, be the foolish immigrant that you ignore, and that's what allows them to sneak through. In the previous episode, Another Path, we had the blind kung fu master. Essentially use that as a similar thing. It says it's very easy for me to play the senile old Chinese man, and no one pays attention to me when they think they have me outwitted, you know. So it is neat. It's always interesting in these shows because these are a product of that late 70s, early 80s world. You know, you often see how the tech is different. You often see how just the way people interact in society has changed so much in like a scant 30 years, you know. You know, there's no interconnectivity of people, you know, which is one of the ways that David can just sort of disappear into the woodwork. Yes.
Into the ether, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, into the ether, you know. He can disappear, and then when he shows up somewhere else, he could be anywhere. He could, you know, David winds up working a lot of jobs that a guy without a past or social security number should not be able to get in this world, you know. You know, when I was tweeting with the MeTV crowd, Saturdays at 7:00 last week, you know, it was The Killer Instinct, which was the one before this. And, you know, David in that one, he's working as he's working as a assistant trainer for a professional football team. And, you know, and he doesn't show up for work on the day of the big game and they fire him. And I tweeted that out, which everyone seemed to love. It's like, yep, they do. They run a tight ship at the Cougars. Sure, they'll hire they'll hire a drifter with no identification for an important job, but he better show up on time. You know, and that's what but you know, when you think about it, back in a day before computers, you know, basically you went in with your resume, you said, here's what I did. And they go, okay. You know? We have no way to verify this, without making long distance phone calls and, which costs money. And you interview well. You're a well-spoken white guy. Why should we doubt you? Yes. Anyway, do you have any final thoughts on this episode, Phil?
Like I said, it was an alright episode, but I think at least some of these early episodes, my problem is always they really don't give the Hulk much of an antagonist to go against. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. This is something we've talked about. Well, the problem is that it is a non-magical world. I mean, yes. This is the Hulk as the first superhuman in this world, and they didn't really work towards an interconnected universe here. So we very rarely get the Hulk in a situation where he has anything to go up against. Now that is going to change. He is going to get, he's going to go up against some magic later on. He faces voodoo, and he will get to fight a Proto Hulk later on, and we're chomping at the bit for those episodes. But right now, yeah, it's usually what they'll do is they'll put the Hulk against something, and we've said that some of the best ones is when he's fighting the front loader. There's a great I think that was in Hulk Breaks Las Vegas. He has to fight a front loader, and then in Models Murder and something from the first season, he fights a car crusher, and we get a really great Hulk scene with that. And of course, in the very one, we also had him once fight a bear and a gorilla. The bear fight is, of course, iconic. He picks up the bear and throws him. Poor bear. But they do then show the bear getting out of the water, just shaking it off. Yeah, and that is one of the biggest problems that they do have in the show is that we don't get anything that is first off, because it's not really serialized. We don't have an ongoing antagonist. We don't have a General Ross in this to chase the Hulk. We don't really get other superhumans until, like I said, later on in the season, or later on in the series, we are going to get some superhumans. And of course, if we ever make it to the movies, he is going to fight Thor and Daredevil. So that we're excited about. But in the meantime, yeah, all he can do, he fights brick walls right now. It's Hulk versus the law. And every so often you will get a nice fight scene where the Hulk will fight like 6 guys. That's usually pretty good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we did not have any of that in this one. But like I said, the best we got was just the Hulk smashing through a wall. And that's good in its own right. But yeah, you do lose a lot when you don't have anything for the Hulk to do. Really, in this, the best episodes usually have something good for the Hulk to do, and Jack McGee right on Bill Bixby's tail, or Jack Colvin on Bill Bixby's tail, and Jack McGee on David Banner's tail. That's usually what makes for the best episode. This had neither of that, so not so much. Now, next week is a very good episode, even though it doesn't have Jack McGee and doesn't really have much for the Hulk to do, but is honestly one of the best episodes so far. That is Wildfire. And we'll talk about that next week. Now, Phil, would you like to give us your social media so folks can follow you and let them know where else they can hear you?
Yes, well, you can find me on many podcasts on the Southgate Media Group. I do Before the Bat. I do the upcoming Legends of DC with a bunch of my friends, including Charlie Esser.
Yay!
And I have two different blogs on the site. But you can always talk to me about anything Marvel or DC Comics, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp, and you can find all my stuff at philparrish.wordpress.com.
Okay. And as always, you can write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's all one word on Superconnectivity blog. You can also follow me along on Twitters, and of course every Saturday night at 7 o'clock when I can, we are live tweeting the Incredible Hulk. Tonight is Stop the Presses, and next week will be this very episode. So please join along with me to tweet, and you can follow me at Twitter at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And if you have ever wanted to bust into the fast-paced world of podcasting, write to me, Charlie Esser, or write to Dave White at the 80s Reboot Podcast and let him know that, hey, I would love to talk The Incredible Hulk with Charlie Esser. Okay, kids, thank you for tuning in with us once again for this week's Scamacast. Try not to Hulk out before next week. Have a good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.